had your Bible lesson this morning, so I think...
Sin and salvation, the path to enlightenment, the faith of Abraham. Is there a place for religion in public school, and should students be allowed to pray?
In school, you can talk about gay rights, you can give out condoms, you can talk about animal rights, you can talk about marrying animals, you can talk about anything, but you dare not say the Lord's Prayer. That, I think, is what people are upset about.
The Supreme Court says public schools have no business promoting religion.
School prayer is something that, over the last 10 years, has started to come back.
Congress is entering the fray with a proposed constitutional amendment that would guarantee the right to pray in public school. Reading, writing, and religion. That's today's topic.
This is Freedom Speaks, a program dedicated to your First Amendment rights.
On our panel, the Reverend Jerry Falwell, Ira Glasser from the ACLU, attorney Larry Crane, columnist Barbara Reynolds, and First Amendment analyst John Siegenthaler.
Welcome to Freedom Speaks. I'm Sandra Van Oker.
And I'm Carrie Brock.
There are two subjects you avoid in polite conversation: politics and religion. Forgive us, we're going to spend the next hour discussing both.
Both sides in the debate over prayer in public schools base their cases on the First Amendment. Those who favor prayer say students don't give up their freedom of religion when they walk through the schoolhouse door.
The First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion. Prayer advocates say students are being denied that First Amendment right. The First Amendment says the government cannot promote religion. Some say a school prayer amendment would do just that. We're here to take a look at both sides.
Our panel is prepared to debate the issue today. Our audience is ready to join in. But first, let's have an overview. More than 30 years ago, the Supreme Court declared state-sponsored prayer and Bible reading in school illegal. What's changed since then? Well, now it's the students, not teachers, who are leading the prayers. And that doesn't go over very well with a mother of 6 in Ecru, Mississippi.
Jason, is this your homework from today?
Yeah.
Well, it was on the floor and it got stepped on.
It's nearly dinner time, and the Herdahl kids are competing for their mother's attention.
Mama, we got problems.
They're not having much luck.
Because, this is just unreal.
These days, Lisa Herdahl spends a lot of her time on the telephone talking about the lawsuit that has her fighting an entire Mississippi town. The battle is over school prayer.
Anything that another person is forced to hear should not be allowed.
Herdahl's children go to the North Pontotoc Attendance Center, where every day prayers go out over the intercom. We were not allowed to tape a devotional, but we do know school officials introduce students, and then the students read a Bible verse and a prayer, often ending with a reference to Jesus Christ.
The students who are involved in prayer in school are simply asking for God's guidance, direction, and blessings upon their day.
I don't go to school to get my religious teachings. I go to church, and I learn it at home, so I don't...
Herdahl's children attend a Pentecostal church. She thinks they're being hurt by what amounts to state-sponsored religion, and she is suing on grounds that prayer violates the First Amendment, which calls for the separation of church and state.
It's dangerous. You do not ever want the government mixed up in your religious life. Just because you happen to be the majority today doesn't mean you're going to be the majority 10 years from now.
I think it's very dangerous when we start allowing people to chip away at free speech.
Scott Thomas represents the other side of this First Amendment struggle. He's from the American Family Association, a Christian group that believes free speech is equally at risk.
If the school completely backs away and says no religious expression is allowed, then it's evidencing essentially a hostility to religion, which is just as bad as endorsing it.
A similar First Amendment argument has been used to defend student-led prayers at high school graduations.
Dear God, we thank you for gathering our friends.
In 1992, a federal appeals court ruled students can pray out loud, within limits.
We will pray! We will!
Back in Mississippi, some students are speaking up about their religious rights, and they rally around school prayer.
If it hadn't been for prayer and Bible classes at our school, I'd never met the Lord.
I don't see why anybody would want prayer, because you got to have prayer to make it.
Signs that the townsfolk support school prayer are everywhere, spelled out on roadside billboards, while orange and blue ribbons in support of prayer decorate nearly every street sign. Home, car, and person inside.
We had prayer and we had Bible teachers years ago, and we had less crime rate then than we do now. And if we had more prayer in school and more Bible teaching, I think we'd have better schools.
Come over here and sit next to Mom. Stay away from the heater.
Because she opposes prayer in school, her doll and her children have been called atheists and devil worshippers. And according to her doll, she has received death threats.
I don't know if when I come home I'm going to see my kids again. It's gotten to the point where I may send my kids out of state just to protect them.
Mrs. Herdall's lawsuit against the school system is just getting underway. Now to the panel. Sandy?
John Siegenthaler, Mrs. Herdall used the word protect. What did the Founding Fathers want to protect us from when they wrote the First Amendment?
Well, I think they were afraid, and I think historians would agree that afraid is the appropriate word, of two sources of great power, the throne and the altar, and the government and the church. And I think that they wanted to create a way to build a wall, and build a wall is Thomas Jefferson's language, to separate the throne and the altar so that people who were part of minority religions, in those days Puritans, Baptists, a few Catholics, some Jews, Unitarians, so that they would be protected against the merger of those two forces. Usually thought of forces for good, but they saw it if you merged those two forces, the altar and the throne, the result would be discrimination against minorities in religion.
Reverend Falwell, the proposed First Amendment, the school prayer amendment, is that really about church and state, or is that about something else, i.e., the declining morality in this country?
I think it is both. But I agree totally with John that the Founding Fathers were very clear. They did not want another Church of England dominating everything, merged with government. But I don't think the Founding Fathers had in mind what has emerged by osmosis out of the 62, 63 rulings of the court, and that is that religion is taboo in public schools and that prayer is speech that is not allowed. And I think we've gone to the far outer extremes. Now, when this amendment to the Constitution finally takes form, I am hopeful that all of us will have some input, a careful look at it, so we don't make the mistakes of pre-62, where in fact there was, I think, unfair treatment of minority religions and non-believers. I think it's got to be student-initiated. We're all against state-mandated, state-created prayers, state-conducted prayers, or religious activities. But student-initiated, the Congress has spoken in the equal access, that's okay, but we're saying that free speech ought to go right into the classroom in the organized, and as long as it's voluntary, student-initiated, student-conducted, and not a moment of silence, the Congress, the Constitution need to give us the right to be silent. You have that in Beijing. I think that it ought to be audible.
Ira Glasser, you have prayer in school. Why do you need an amendment?
You don't need an amendment. The fact is that the Supreme Court decisions have not gone as far as Reverend Falwell suggests. If a student wants to say grace before sitting down and eating in a school cafeteria, if a student wants to carry a Bible to school and read it during a quiet period or a study hall, if several students want to get together in time out of class, either around lunch or some other time, and pray, they have the right to do so under the current First Amendment, and if anybody tries to stop them, there are plenty of organizations around, including the ACLU, who will defend their right to do it. You don't need an amendment to do that. What you need an amendment to do is to make permissible what you saw happening in Ecru, Mississippi. What the amendment actually says is that the state may select a prayer. It says the state may not compose the prayer, but the state will select the prayer. And the question is whether or not we want the government or need the government to pick our prayer for us, to turn the school into a church for a few minutes each day. And what the difference is this. A student can sit down and say grace before eating. Has the right to do that now. What the school may not do is turn the whole cafeteria into a church for a few seconds and say grace as a uniform thing, including for kids who don't want to say grace. And whether it's student-initiated or not is not the issue.
Larry Crane.
Yeah, the problem is, I disagree with Ira. The problem is students are not free to say a voluntary prayer. There are cases, we've had a number of cases come in the last year where a student, for example, Bobby McLaughlin in Oklahoma, who wanted to do nothing but sit and pray at his desk before a math test, was marched to the principal's office and told to write 500 times, "I will not pray in class."
And you're going to win that case?
Absolutely. And the
Right,
problem,
which is why you don't
there's
need
a
an
lot of
amendment.
knee-jerk reaction taking place.
No,
Barbara Reynolds, should the ACLU win that case, in your opinion?
No, we need prayer in the schools. We look at the situation in Mississippi. Nobody is for that. But you have drugs in the school. I come from Washington, D.C. We've had children shot down in cold blood in the schools. We have AIDS in school. We have everything in school. We need to have the ability to pray because prayer will establish what we think is a value of morality in the schools, which we need to have order.
Barbara, if I come at you, though, and say, during prayers, people are getting killed, what will prayer do to stop it if the police can't do it?
Ever since '62, if you go back and look at what we had in the schools, when I was in school, we had respect. You did not have teachers being beat up and shot at. We had a sense of moral order. I don't know how this is not the way African Americans relate to prayer and faith. We do not say that there's a place that you're supposed to say, God, now we're going to school here and we want you to stay out. You go back in the Bible, I mean, they always put God in the center of life. And we don't want prayer to be treated like something to be shunned. We want prayer in the middle. And not only that, after you have prayer, then we ought to start the conversation of how should we teach religion in the school.
I want to ask Barbara, when you tell me that since prayer went out of the schools, everything has gone downhill in the schools, I hear an awful lot of people say that. But I also hear an awful lot of people say, oh, it's not that. It's really school desegregation that did that. Since the court ruled in school desegregation, everything's gone downhill. I mean, I don't mean to link up your argument with the argument of blatant racists, but I must say, it's difficult for me to believe that anybody would stop taking drugs to school just because a prayer was said in the morning, or that anybody stop taking guns to school just because there was a prayer said in the morning.
But see, this is not funny. Drugs and alcohol, these kinds of things, you look at the families. You have a breakdown of the family where you can say, well, just pray at home. You need to have prayer in the center of where children are so that they can know what is valuable in our society. Why can't you do it at the Supreme Court and Congress and you can't do it in the schools?
Since this program is dedicated to freedom of expression, and this will be the last chance, the first and last chance I'll ever get to quote Scripture to Reverend Falwell.
Yes.
In the beginning, there was the Word. I'm 67 years old. I learned about prayers in my home, as did my contemporaries. Why does that not exist now, and why do we need the state to guarantee it? Why doesn't the family do this?
There's no question that the family is the basic unit, and the family breakdown is our primary problem in society. But we contribute to it when we leave the impression with the children that religion is a bad thing, since we can't talk about it. We can talk about anything else, but not prayer, not God, not religion. Now, let me say something to you a minute ago. You and I are good friends, but I want to talk about it now.
You're denying his First Amendment right.
What you said,
I'm just shouting at him.
I have no problem. I have a good volume. But let me say with Ira that, and he and I are friends, but back, what he said about the court ruling is true. The court did not go to the extreme that the school boards, the principals, the school teachers, the society has taken it because of the ACLU and the Ira Glasses, who have scared these people to death. They don't have the budget out there to fight the ACLU, so they say just let's just de-religionize the marketplace here in the schools and throw God in prayer rather than fight you guys.
So you want to have a constitutional amendment that violates the separation of church and state because the current law, which is enough, is not being enforced.
Because unless we have a constitutional amendment that is so graphic and so clear, you guys who are so hostile to religion are going to keep on pressing this point until it is no longer possible to pray.
My parents sent me, that is not true. My parents sent me to Hebrew school 5 days a week. I had trouble trying to play baseball because I got out of school at 3 and I had to be in Hebrew school by 4. 5 days a week. They would have been outraged, however, if in the public school where I was supposed to be taught reading and writing and arithmetic, somebody else's prayer was forced on me by the government.
I would never question your faith, your parents' faith, but that organization you've run with so many years has been a scourge in this country.
If I just may interrupt, and we have to go to the audience, but I have to say, and you'll get a chance to answer, there was a solution to your problem. Your coach could have used you as a pinch hitter. Karen?
Sooner or later, you all are going to begin yelling about Jones versus Clear Creek, and so we want to explain this briefly to people before you begin talking about it. It's basically given the proponents of prayer a glimmer of hope. Now, in the case Jones v. Clear Creek, a judge allows prayer at a high school graduation ceremony provided the prayer passes several tests. To be legal, the prayer must be student-initiated and led, non-sectarian, and non-proselytizing. But the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has only jurisdiction in just 3 states. Move on to the Ninth Circuit, you get a very different picture. The Ninth Circuit says graduation is a school-controlled, school-sponsored event, and that any prayer offends the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Many observers, Sandy, believe the Supreme Court will have to take up the issue of graduation prayer to settle the disagreement between these circuit courts. Back to you.
But that decision only affects 3 states right now, right?
Right.
Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Where does it go from there?
That's the Jones case.
Yeah.
Well, that case was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declined to review it. So it just sits there affecting those 3 states. The Idaho case in the Ninth Circuit goes the other way, and that is now being appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court may take it, may not take it. Eventually, the Supreme Court will resolve that question.
Mr. Dooley, the famed Irish historian and wit of the turn of the century, said the Supreme Court follows election returns. Will the courts follow the election returns? And there was a meeting in these last elections. Larry?
Problem is you've got such a factionalized court right now. You've got Scalia and Rehnquist and O'Connor saying that each Establishment Clause case should be decided on a case-by-case basis. So there's no predictability for the sake of flexibility in the rulings. And so it's difficult to say with now the new composition of the court. The one thing that is clear, the Supreme Court has studiously avoided ever ruling with absolutes in the area of religion. It has always allowed some play in the joint, and that has created the problem here because you've got a split now in the Ninth Circuit and the Fifth Circuit grappling over the interpretation of the
And if I'm not wrong on this, you've got a split in the proponents of this. I remember Newt Gingrich was all for this. He's backed away. Reverend Falwell, were you for it initially and then have backed away now? I see a pulling back from this proposal.
No, I haven't pulled away.
Newt Gingrich has.
Well, let me put it this way. 81% of the American people do want an amendment to the Constitution. That's the most recent survey. It goes 85 to 78% constantly, no matter who is saying what. And this is one case where the American people do have a little more intelligence than the 9 people sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. I know most elitists don't believe that, but I think that the American people are crying out for help for the schools, for the families, and returning prayer to schools on a voluntary basis. And by the way, I want to say that whether it's a Muslim, a Jewish, a Hindu, an unbelieving child, an evangelical, every person getting equal footing. I don't know how in the world that kind of thing could build anything but respect for the faiths of one another and religion in America.
When you hear this mother, this Pentecostal mother in that school, worrying that the prayers her child hears there influence that child in ways she does not want that child influenced, does it not bother you at all?
That would bother me too, blasting a prayer over the PA system. And
that's what the constitutional amendment would permit.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes,
that's the one
yes.
you might want to write so we could get
No, that's the one you fellas wrote.
I'm telling you.
I have it here if you want to read it.
I'm telling you, Ira, that's not the one I will sign off on.
Here, read it.
That's not the one Barbara would sign off on.
What would you sign?
Which is the one?
Wait,
Which is
Barbara,
the one?
Barbara.
Tell me which
No, wait, I want to go back to
what
Barbara.
you're saying about Newt Gingrich, because we have to understand.
I haven't said anything about him his mother didn't say about him.
He is pushing this back because of the political consequences. But what I am trying to say is that school prayer, like Reverend Falwell says, 85% of the people say this. This is a movement that goes beyond politics. I should say that I'm a graduate from Howard School of Divinity. I will be an ordained minister in May. When I go to churches in the African American community and talk about school prayer, People in these churches want school prayer. It goes beyond politics.
Let us go beyond the panel for a minute. Let's be ecumenical. Let's go to the audience.
Dr. Jan Van Eyes has a question. He's a pediatrician.
The prayer amendment is directed at the morality of children. Should there be an a priori distinction to the limit of free speech directed at adults and at children?
Well, since Dr. Spock's not here, I'll let the John Siegenthaler answer that.
I think the way the question is posed really makes it difficult to give an answer, yes or no, up or down. Maybe expand it a little bit.
Should children be used to get certain things across? Should we really use our freedom of speech to coerce children by an amendment?
Well, I think there probably would be a grave disagreement between Reverend Falwell and Ira Glasser and among the different members of this panel as to what's coercion and under what circumstances is it coercion. It does seem to me that presently there is an opportunity for children to pray in the schools without the danger of being coerced. And my sense of it is that if that were allowed to continue for a time, and the impact of that, it's a relatively recent experience, and some of the school districts are very much concerned right now. Many principals and many teachers are right now taking action prohibiting the discussion of religion or prayer in the schools in violation of what the law is now. And they're worried about doing the very thing you say, coercing those students. Now, I think where the line of coercion is and whether it's really coercion is something that we're all going to disagree about.
I feel coerced when I go into schools and cannot hear religious speech. For example, if you talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, you can hear what they did, but you don't hear that this movement came from a church, that they prayed every day, that they asked the Spirit of the Lord to be with them. I feel coerced because I feel history is a lie. I feel philosophy is a lie, because what religious people did in ending the Vietnam War, all of this is out. We're living a lie because you're keeping not only prayer out, but religion out of history.
Who is keeping it out?
The schools. We cannot talk about most of the schools, the textbooks, most of the American schools.
Now wait a
minute.
You guys have
that school in Mississippi sure isn't keeping it out, is it?
The what?
That school you saw in Mississippi, that sure aren't keeping it out.
No one is.
My kids in the public school. My kids in the public school
is building. I think we all really basically want mostly the same thing.
You are talking about problems that are not, that can be remedied and must be remedied under the current law. No constitutional amendment that has yet been proposed is relevant to the problem you just described. The problem you described can be remedied right now. You have that problem, come to me, we'll sue.
Reverend Falwell said we basically want the same. Just a second. Reverend Falwell said we want basically the same things. I don't. I want to go to Kerry.
Yes.
In the audience.
Prayer in public school was common before the Supreme Court decisions of the early 1960s. And here's what those days were like for the son of Jewish immigrants who attended a predominantly Christian public school system.
I was the only Jewish student, to my knowledge, in the entire student body.
Despite that, Bohm was called on by his school to lead a Christian prayer before the entire student body. He felt out of place and embarrassed.
I was taught the Old Testament, and the New Testament was foreign to me. It was not something that I had dealt with. And because our religious beliefs did not include a belief in Jesus Christ, having to mention that in the prayer session was a problem for me.
Bohm worries today's push to put prayer back in public schools would force other children to relive his experience. But he does favor the moment of silence.
I think it is a compromise, but it's a healthy compromise. The minority religions fear a moment of silence only because many believe it's the slippery slope to prayer in school that is focused on one religion or another.
So, question for the panel. If prayer is to be reintroduced in public schools, how do you keep from infringing on the rights of minority students?
Well, the answer is that you don't. The answer is that it'll be determined by the majority. That 85% that Reverend Falwell keeps citing When you ask people, are you in favor of having prayer back in the schools? Of course they say yes, because they're in favor of prayer, most Americans. But then you ask them if they would like to have a Muslim prayer every day, and that 85% drops down to 22% in a big hurry. Because everybody likes to have their prayer in public schools.
But you're being disingenuous about that. You know,
I'm just describing the polls.
First of all, look at America. We are a different, we're salad bowl. And we need to not only understand who are the Muslims, what do they believe. We need to have a rabbi in the school talking about what Jews believe.
Barbara, you're talking about education. You're not talking about religious ceremonies.
Yes. Prayer is education, because you begin to know who are the people that pray this prayer. That's how we can learn
Barbara,
to
I
be
want to go back to, I want to go back to a
listening.
theme I tried to raise. I do think that we are pushing too big a burden on schools. We want them to do not just religion, we want them to do sex education, we want to take care of them when they have two parents working at home. Reverend Falwell, are we asking the schools to do too much? And is this really a dodge for another issue that this society is getting out of control?
No, I think the schools already are doing too much. I think they're trying to be mom, dad, everything. But I think where they fundamentally are flawed is that we're doing it with the idea that there are no values, no absolutes, no rights, no wrongs, no Judeo-Christian ethic. And what Barbara's saying is this, and I hear what Ira's saying, and if I had to lean just on Ira's wisdom and fairness, I'd go with that. But the perception out in the public schools, is that any prayer is going to cost us a lawsuit, and we don't have the money, and until we get a constitutional amendment to keep the ACLU and the Americans United for Separation of Church-State and all these hostile groups, keep them at bay so that any little school down in Alabama that has a principal with no budget for fighting the ACLU can allow a prayer. It's the law. Until that happens, we're going to have these instances that the American Center for Law and Justice and other groups are fighting every day.
Illustrate that, Larry.
The problem is there's a basic misperception of a so-called myth of separation in our schools, and it's not true. Students are religious people, just as we adults are, and they can't shed their religiosity or their Christianity or their Muslim faith at the schoolhouse gate. And so for them to be to meaningfully exercise their faith, they have to do it in the school where they're there a large part of their time. But there is a misperception, and I want to say on well-meaning school personnel and administrators, a misunderstanding of the law. And I think I agree with Reverend Falwell that what is needed is to restore some clarity there, and the only way we can do that is, in my opinion, through a well-worded, carefully drafted constitutional amendment.
But you don't know what it says, right?
Let me just ask, Larry, if that amendment passes, just as Jerry Falwell outlined.
It isn't drafted yet.
Well, if it's drafted and if it passes, isn't the result going to be that that poor woman, that Pentecostal mother in Ekron, Mississippi, is not going to be able to go to our Glasser and assert her right to have her child not enforced?
Where in the Constitution are we guaranteed protection from of being offended? I'm offended by watching a lot of TV. I'm offended by things I see on talk shows. I don't have any constitutional right of protection from
Yes,
from
you
being
do.
offended.
You can turn off the television.
Yes, but in the classroom,
But
likewise.
you can't get out of the classroom where you're compelled to attend.
Well, what about the majority
and
of
the
kids in
government,
the
your
classroom?
government is foisting someone else's religion on your kid because you have some cockeyed
all
idea
right,
about morality.
85% of the kids who are offended by the fact that that prayer cannot and God cannot be mentioned
I don't
today.
mean offended.
That's not true.
I think the
They are
minority
being
has,
offended. You keep saying it,
I
but
have
it's not true.
to part company with Reverend Falwell on that, because I do think the minorities must be protected.
Oh, I
That's
believe
what
that
the
too.
Constitution is about.
Well, how do you protect that? How do you protect that? How do you
because
protect
we're
that
talking-
minority Pentecostal mother in Ekron, Mississippi?
Hold on. This
person
minority,
should not have been
this
coerced.
minority will invoke a vow of silence upon thee. We will go to the audience.
We're going to give the audience a break here. Betsy Davis is a homemaker.
Yes, I direct this to Mr. Glasser. Recently, we had a story about a high school graduation. When it came time to high school graduation, that the ACLU sent out a letter to high school principals saying if there were student-led prayer, they could be hit with a lawsuit by the ACLU for a student-led prayer at graduation. I think that's religious intimidation. I think that's exactly what we need, some sort of amendment to protect against.
Well, We did send out that
Yes, you
letter.
did.
We did send out that letter, and I'm not making up stories the way you are. I mean,
Yes, you
we
did.
did send out that letter, and I'll tell you why. If a student who's giving a valedictory speech wants to invoke the name of God or Jesus or Allah or anything else, perfect right to do so. That's what the letter said. What the letter also said, however, is that the graduation ceremony is a school-controlled event. And the fact that a majority of students decide to have their prayer in an official way imposed on everybody who may not share those religious beliefs, that's a violation whether the school sponsors it or whether a majority of the students sponsor it. The notion of religious liberty is that you cannot be forced to participate in a religious ceremony that's not of your choosing simply because you're outvoted.
I will
That's
say,
the issue.
just before we go to Larry Crane, that's the first time in living memory that the invocation of the phrase "a letter" and the U.S. Postal Service has brought laughter in my presence. Larry.
I represented Dwayne Olam, the principal, in that very case. And the problem is, this great bastion of free speech, the ACLU, has sent that letter, and they sent it out nationally to school districts across the country. It had such a chilling effect on free speech, the free speech rights of students who sincerely wanted this was their hour, their graduation, to more meaningfully experience.
Whose graduation was it?
It's the students' graduation.
How many of them?
And many of them earned the right to speak.
Wait a minute. How many of all of the students?
Yes, all of the students.
What about the single Muslim or the single Jew in an overwhelmingly Christian student body? Is it their graduation too?
It's theirs too, but when you carve out a universe of possible
and they get
speeches,
outvoted, right?
Any speech involving Jesus Christ, that's not pluralism, that's secularism.
I'm not talking. I said that the letter, you know well, that the letter said if a student said that in a valedictory speech, that's not only permitted, it's protected by the current Constitution.
No, sir.
What the school may not do is pick somebody's prayer by majority vote and impose it with the force of government on people who don't share those religious beliefs. You guys spend a lot of time talking about government being too big, too intrusive, the government can't solve all our problems. This government, which can't solve poverty, can't solve drugs, can't solve crime, can't solve welfare, this government that's too big and needs to be reduced, we're being told, now the government is going to tell us how to pray. It's going to pick the prayers for my child.
Now,
You're debating a straw person because no one said that.
Let the hand of Big Brother, the moderator, end this, and we'll go now to Carrie.
Some of you might be surprised to learn that public school students already have the right to pray. And all across the country, students are exercising that right. Here are a few examples. Survey says 7 out of 10 Americans say they favor a constitutional amendment to allow voluntary prayer in public schools. 1 out of 4 oppose it. Here in Los Angeles, there is already prayer in public schools. More than half of the high schools have student-organized religious clubs.
Heavenly Father, thank you that
The American Center for Law and Justice estimates there are 12,000 such religious clubs all across the nation.
just bless the time that we have together. In your name, amen.
Prayer in schools. More than 1 out of 10 American children attend private or parochial schools where prayer is not banned. It's 7 a.m., time for the moment of silence at a Tennessee high school.
May I have your attention? At this time, we'll observe a minute of silence.
Tennessee is one of 26 states with moment of silence laws.
Thank you.
The Supreme Court has never actually endorsed the practice, but the court has implied the laws are okay if the intent is not religious.
What's up here? Nobody can control it.
Here in Georgia, high school teacher Brian Bowen thinks the intent is religious, so he keeps on teaching right through the moment of silence. He is later suspended.
Intent is clearly to bring prayer back to the classroom, and at some point you've got to take a stand, because if you don't take a stand here, is it going to be 2 minutes next year? Is it going to be censorship next?
Survey says more than 9 out of 10 Americans believe in God. More than a third say they have witnessed a miracle. So would you volunteer to act as a referee between those who want more religion in public schools and those who don't? Before you answer that, listen to Charles Haynes. He is a man who spent years in the hot seat.
The First Amendment separates church from state, but not religion from public life.
Charles Haynes is an education expert who mediates disputes between Americans who want a school prayer amendment and those who don't. He came here to Aurora, Colorado in search of common ground, and he found the two sides deeply divided on issues such as sex education.
It's simply a reality of lifestyle in the 90s that abstinence is not going to be practiced by all children, and it would be irresponsible not to prepare those that make a different choice.
What's the rationale for teaching don't do drugs when kids are doing drugs? What's the rationale for teaching we don't murder people when people do it every day? We don't adjust the standard to what goes on in the street.
So, do you think these two women could ever agree on anything? Charles Haynes does. He says school systems can satisfy both camps by creating policies that deal fairly with religion. Many in Congress think it will take much more than policy changes. Representative Ernest Istook says we do need an amendment to the Constitution.
But unfortunately, we've gotten to the point where you must have a constitutional amendment as the only avenue left to permit people to offer a vocal prayer in public schools.
Charles Haynes is here with us now to talk about his methods. The congressman says constitutional amendment, got to have it. What do you say?
I'd like to try the amendment we have. First, the First Amendment, I think, allows us to do a great many things that we haven't done in public schools. And I would add that we've never done since the beginning of public school history. We've either had a kind of Protestant tone to the schools for the first part of our history, and the last 30 or 40 years, we've kind of had a secular environment in the schools.
There's a lot of confusion, though, among educators, isn't there? Clearly.
Great deal of confusion and misunderstanding. And I think that many Americans want to see us take religious liberty and religion seriously in public education. And my concern is the constitutional amendment debate, another debate about a constitutional amendment on prayer, might keep us from taking things seriously and doing what we can do in public education.
I want to point out to our audience that Dr. Haynes has just written a guide for teachers on teaching about religion in public schools. It's called Finding Common Ground. What are some of the highlights you've included in your guide?
Well, first of all, I think the religion in the curriculum is only one part of an overall school culture we need to change. Protect the religious rights of students. Students can pray. Students can have equal access to clubs if other clubs are allowed, and so forth. Students can distribute religious literature subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. There are all kinds of ways in which we can protect the conscience of our students and our parents in our public schools.
What's the core issue here? What's at the very heart of this?
I think this goes back to the beginning of public education. What kind of nation are we going to be? What kind of people are we going to be? I think we need to find a way not to have a sacred public school or a naked public school, but a civil public school where people of all faiths or none are welcome there and their conscience is protected by what we do there. We need to accommodate religious conscience, and if we don't do it, then the fuel for amendments to the Constitution and other proposals are going to continue.
Speaking of civil, what do you think about the conversation that our panelists have been having?
Well, unfortunately, because we don't always have time to explain our positions fully, I think people speak past one another on these issues. I think that Dr. Falwell was getting at the point that we have a lot of agreement in this country, that kids should have the right to express themselves in class religiously, to draw a religious piece of artwork, to pray before their math test. But I think how we get to that point is the important question. Will we get to fair public schools by another constitutional amendment debate, or will we get to it by finding ways to actually do what we're trying to do in this project and go out there and help schools and school districts do the right thing now?
What does the panel think of what Dr. Haynes has been saying?
Well, I think we should teach religion, and I keep going farther than prayer to religion, and Ira tries to back me up, but I still will go farther. Give you an example. You can't teach creationism so often in schools. We teach our children that they evolved from apes and monkeys. And so then when they go to school and they fight and act like apes and monkeys, then we say, look how violent they are. Wouldn't it be better if we showed that they come from a God, you know?
Amen.
I mean, it gets to a point. It gets ridiculous in our value system of not bringing religious teaching within the school system.
Dr. Haynes, I want to read your book because I like everything you just said. But I also fear that without a clearly defined and carefully drafted constitutional amendment, the ACLU and such organizations will never allow to happen. They will be there to contest everyone. And it isn't a matter of who wins or whatever. It is a matter that most school districts don't have the money to fight these well-oiled machines.
Are you a well-oiled machine? It's the first time I've ever heard of it. I get requests for money
every,
all the time.
Yeah, well, every time Reverend Falwell speaks, more people send us money. But if you're interested in the job as our membership director, it's open. But the fact is that what Mr. Haynes said is exactly right. Everything that we all seem to be agreed upon can be done now, can be done within the area of the First Amendment. And it is not true that the ACLU sues to prevent that. The ACLU is prepared to sue to enable it. Anytime a student is suspended for saying grace, for reading a Bible, for carrying a Bible, I'm aware of all these stories. But you know, Senator Coates got up on the floor of Congress in March of 1994 and read out 7 case histories of cases like that, in which lawsuits had to be filed to defend the right of a kid to exercise religious freedom in the schools, that I say is permissible. A researcher was put on those cases. Not one of those cases was factually true. Not one of those cases was ever filed. It was all made up. Now, the fact is, you can keep saying that the ACLU is an intimidating force against that, but we have a very clear area of agreement, I think. We agree that kids can exercise their individual religious freedom, and we agree that the state should not sponsor and endorse somebody's religious views.
I hear what
so
you're saying.
if that's true, we don't need this constitutional amendment, and you tell me that 85% of the people support an amendment which you say hasn't been written.
Hey,
now
that's
funny.
No. 85% want to see prayer back in school. Now let me just. I'm not going to
what
quote
does that mean?
I'm not going to quote the 7 things you just said were spurious that Senator Coates quoted. Let me tell you about Little Lynchburg, Virginia. We're 65,000 population. We're famous only for CB fleets, enemas, and we make chapsticks. That's all we've ever done. Now,
Jeez, I wouldn't teach that in school.
Well, I mean, I've lived there 61 years too. But let me tell you, our school superintendent, a good man and a religious man, for fear of what you guys and others would do, he has now told all the athletic teams you cannot pray in the locker room. Now check that one out. You'll find it to be accurate. That is happening all over America because of the fear you guys strike in the hearts.
I'll tell you what. It's nice to be so powerful, but I'll tell you what.
Well, you are.
When you think that something is happening that violates the First Amendment that we ought to do something about, and it's because we've confused someone, you pick up the phone and call me, and I'll write your principal.
Larry Crane for the last word for the moment.
Yeah, I'd invite Ira to our offices at the American Center for Law and Justice in Virginia, and they'd look through the 1,800 files plus in 1 year alone of either actual filed cases in litigation or cases of religious discrimination. And if what Jerry Falwell is saying wasn't true, there wouldn't be that type of
Let me ask one question. If we follow Charles Haynes' thesis of finding common ground, would we not do away with your lawsuits and Hourglass's lawsuits? And would we not have what we're all looking for?
But
and
the
that
only
is
way, John, we're going to follow it is to put it in the law as a constitutional amendment.
It is
so
in the
those
law.
guys will
And
go
would
back
you?
home.
Wait, we have to break. But would you call that amendment "Where he leads me, I will follow"?
Pretty much.
I don't want to break until we give Charles a chance to respond to what they've said.
One of the important distinctions is between teaching religion and imposing religion in public schools, which I think we don't want to do, and teaching about religion and having religion be a natural part of everything we do in schools. The point is that we have in our a rare opportunity now that this debate has come back before the country, a rare opportunity to do the right thing in schools. And if we follow up and take it seriously, a lot of the distrust that fuels debates about prayer will evaporate. If Americans truly believe that schools are going to be fair places where people of all faiths are treated fairly, and if religion is taken seriously, not just mentioned here and there, but taken seriously, and if we take character education and moral and civic education seriously, we can achieve common ground in our communities, and we can find ways to make public schools, again, trusted by parents who, deeply religious parents, who want to know that when their kids go to public school, their conscience is going to be protected and their rights are going to be protected.
Do you think this group of people can find common ground, this very group of people
Well,
right
I think there's
here?
common ground today in the discussion. I think there is common ground, and I would also add this, that we must take this opportunity to follow up this kind of conversation with real projects and real efforts in schools, not just debated on national level. Where we have done this around the country, it's happening. We have a statewide project in California.
Yes, that's right.
And in many school districts where we've had time to work and re-educate our school people on what the First Amendment really means, it actually works, and we don't have lawsuits.
Education.
John Siegenthaler, where in the Constitution is the phrase common ground?
Well, I mean, but you don't have to have common ground written into the Constitution. I mean, if there is comity among conflicting points of view, there are two good things that are going to happen. Well, I hate to say it's a good thing to put a lawyer out of business, but if you follow...
You'll still have the meter running.
But if you follow Charles's mandate, the mandate of that guide, I think you put lawyers on both sides out of business. Now, that might not make our Larry on this issue.
But I want to say this. I like his proposal because the school prayer amendment right now is being pushed by Newt Gingrich and conservative Christians who have not been right on the race issue, have not been right on the gender issue, and this makes some of us who are right on the gender and racial issues not want to be a part of that group.
Have you seen him leading the troops, Newt Gingrich? I thought he was in the back saying, march on this issue.
So this would be a way to get
answer
it
me,
out
Barbara.
of politics.
It's an important question. Why is he not in the front? He was before.
No, he has put this back because he feels like he wants to get the other points of the contract of America out of the way, and this would be just too much division in it. But it's there. As soon as the other points, 10 points or so, are pushed, then he's coming.
The problem is education is needed, and I agree with Dr. Haynes. Education is essential. The problem is while we're educating, going into the school districts and doing that vital service, students' fundamental rights are being violated, and it is something that must be addressed. It must be addressed quickly in the courts if we have to go that route. But I think we should.
Larry, look, you were talking about a problem of enforcement. I know you're new at this game, but welcome to the world of enforcement. When Brown against Board of Education said that schools that were segregated were unconstitutional, it didn't happen overnight. Some of us had to go to court for 20 years to enforce that law, and you didn't need another constitutional amendment that said, we really mean it, guys. What you needed is you needed people enforcing the law we had.
We've been debating this since 47.
The fact is that you've got violations of two kinds in the schools. You have a violation if a kid is suspended for saying grace before she eats. That's unconstitutional now. One of us should take that case if it arises. Then you have another kind of violation, the kind of thing that's going on in Ecru, Mississippi, where the state is imposing religious ceremonies on kids whose families don't share those beliefs. That's also unconstitutional.
Excuse me, I have to be the enforcer.
Commercial break.
No, I wish.
Not a commercial. You've been hearing that some educators don't understand the laws governing religion in public schools. So sometimes educators err on the side of safety. And here are two examples, one from Texas and one from Michigan. Prayer banned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence on Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
State-sponsored school prayers were banned back in 1962, but experts say the Supreme Court never at that time intended to squelch individual religious expression. To this day, some educators are confused. In Texas, Sammy Garcia drew a picture like this in his kindergarten class. The teacher tore it up.
She said that I can't draw that because she doesn't like people drawing about things of God. And she says, don't you know I can get fired, Miss Garcia? You shouldn't be teaching these things and letting him come to show it at school.
Individual students are free to pray, read their Bibles, even invite others to join their religious group, as long as they are not disruptive. In Michigan, Kelly Denoyer was so proud of this church solo, she took the video to school for show and tell. Her teacher and her principal wouldn't let her show it.
As soon as the principal heard from the teacher that we talked about Jesus, she said no because of the separation of church and state.
My religion didn't count, but other people could bring in whatever they wanted.
I was like flabbergasted to the point of saying, what are they talking about? What do you mean she can't show the tape? Good night, she's singing a Christian song in church.
The trick is to find the balance between allowing children to be as religiously expressive as they want to be while at the same time absolutely denying to the school the power to coerce or pressure anyone else to join in.
Survey says 8 out of 10 Americans claim a religious affiliation with at least one of America's 1,600 church denominations.
We've got 3 minutes left. Final thoughts, sermonettes, if you will. Barbara?
We need prayer in the schools, but we also need the conservative Christians to do more to help poor children, to get off the agenda of trying to put poor children into orphanage. We need Christians who really will be about love, mercy, and justice, and have these values in the public school system.
Ira?
We need to teach religion.
There is no link, Barbara, between morality and government-sponsored prayer in the schools. If there were, then in the 40s and 50s, where the schools of Mississippi had more official prayer sessions than any other state in the country, that was also the state where they were lynching blacks, where you had Jim Crow laws, where you had racial terrorism. In my view, there was more immorality before 1962 in the South, where prayer was plentiful, than there was after 1962, when school-sponsored prayer was abolished. There's no easy link, and you ought not to make that connection as facilely as you have.
Larry Crane.
I'd like to quote Justice Jackson in an early case of 1954 when he said that we are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a divine being. And if at the very least, the prayer amendment will heighten public awareness and sensitivity to this vital issue and the need to do away with the fear and the confusion brought on by intimidating lawsuits or the threat of intimidating lawsuits, then I'm all for it, if for no other reason to stir in public debate.
Reverend Falwell.
Senator, carefully crafted constitutional amendment for return of prayer to schools will be a very positive thing as long as it allows not just for a Muslim prayer or a Jewish prayer or an evangelical prayer, but a prayer by any and every student in the classroom and the right for the rest who believe in nothing to do homework.
John Siegenthaler, would Jefferson, would Madison, how does it fit in?
I think Jefferson and Madison would be frightened by the idea of another amendment to supersede their amendment. Thomas Jefferson once said, if my neighbor believes in 20 gods or none, he does me no injury, he neither breaks my back, he neither breaks my leg nor picks my pocket. I think he was afraid of the very thing that many people are afraid of, minorities, granted, many people are afraid of today, and that is, once again, the merger of the throne and the altar.
Thank you, Kerry.
Our thanks first to our audience members for joining us today here on this edition of Freedom Speaks. Also certainly to our panel members who joined us coming from far away, Reverend Jerry Falwell, Barbara Reynolds, Ira Glasser, and Mr. Larry Crane. Thank you so much for being here today. This week's Young Voices had plenty to say about the moment of silence observed at their high school. While some use the 60-second break to pray, others don't.
Sometimes I pray. Most of the time I'm just finishing up homework that I need to do or whatever. I think that's what most people do.
A lot of times I'm just asleep, but it's my time to pray and just ask God just to watch over me during the school day and just guide me.
It definitely shouldn't be in the classroom where other people have to participate or even listen to it.
Because, you know, different people have different beliefs, and then people will get upset because you're not praying their prayer. It's the only time in the entire school when people are here that it's quiet, and you can actually go, quiet.
People who don't want it, they get their way. They don't have to hear it, but if we want to hear it, so why shouldn't we get our way?
Before school, after school, that would be fine. I have no problem with that. But Christian or non-Christian, I just don't believe it. It belongs in school.
And many of the teens we interviewed said they do not want student-led prayer in the classroom because they worry that one person's prayer might offend another person. Heard what our panelists have had to say, but I'd like to take a last minute or so and hear what John and Sandy have to say. Let's start with you.
I'm all for a return to an emphasis on cultural values, Old Testament values. This is right, this is wrong, no in-betweens. I think this country's suffering a degradation of taste, culture, morality. But I worry that we're always confused about what role we want the government to play. We say we don't want the government in this, We don't want the government in that. But here is a clear case where people are inviting the government back to do the things that should have been done in the homes.
More than 2 centuries after the Founding Fathers met, this panel was saying many of the same things in different words. This fight has been with us from the beginning, and it's with us today. Halfway through, mid-1840s, there were riots between Catholics and Protestants over the reading of the Douay Bible in the public schools, and the Catholics were upset about that. This issue has been with us. It's like Elvis. It's not going to die.
And John, it shouldn't die, because this is one of the things that I think is magical about the American experiment, the lively tension that goes on. And I just am so aghast at us returning more and more to laws. We have witness in Europe right now of what religious divisions do to people. And I think the longer we can keep this at bay, the better we are.
The line of the program, it's like Elvis. We know what you think and what you think. Now we'd like to know how you feel about our program, Freedom Speaks. Please drop us a line. Our address is Freedom Speaks, 1207 18th Avenue South, Nashville, Tennessee, 37212. And if you'd like to know more about the Freedom Forum or the First Amendment, call the 1-800 number you see right there, 1-800-830-3733. For Sander Van Oker, for John Siegenthaler, I'm Carrie Brock, and we hope to see you again next week right here on Freedom Speaks.
Freedom Speaks, America's only talk show dedicated to First Amendment issues. Next on Freedom Speaks, the battle over school prayer.
The perception out of the public schools is that any prayer is going to cost us a lawsuit.
Join Sander Van Oker and Carrie Brock on Freedom Speaks, more than just talk. Next, the battle over school prayer.
The perception out of the public schools is that any prayer is going to cost us a lawsuit.